Let's talk about burnout and especially how it's related to organizational justice. Burnout is essentially a long-term consequence of stress. I think we all have a kind of intuitive understanding what burnout is. It's the idea like you're burned out. You don't have anything left to give to burn and to continue to do one's work. Now, burnout is typical of caring professions like nursing or therapists, teachers, people involved in ministry, social work, especially when you're dealing with people that aren't especially cooperative. You just keep giving and giving and giving, and sometimes it's just rejected, or many times it's rejected, and it is just really, it gets more and more difficult. And then when you don't provide adequate service to the recipients, to the customers, to the people that are getting these services, whether it's people that social workers are working for, therapists that they're trying to help, nurses are trying to take care of people. There's things get worse. For example, in the medical field, patients start to die. In social work, people do extremely self-destructive things, and this leads to even more stress in the person in the caring profession. And so it kind of just feeds on each other and gets worse and worse and worse, and the person trying to administer these services to people it becomes almost unbearable. So it's typical in the caring professions when you're constantly interacting with people. But it can also result from isolation and a lack of face-to-face communication, because there might be a lack of social support. That's one of the main problems with distance working, online jobs, is you're just alone so much, and we're made to need humans and to need support from other people, but we might not even remember the name of our boss and have never met them if we have an online job. There's just no social support going on sometimes. Another interesting phenomena with distance jobs is what's known as Zoom fatigue. We might be interacting with people, or we might be, more precisely, we're interacting with a bunch of pixels lined up in an array of squares on our screen. And they represent real people, but the resolution is really low, so we don't really get all of the nuances. In addition, there's so many people at one time, it's hard, we can't really have eye-to-eye contact with somebody and connect emotionally. If there's a delay, it drives us batty because it's super hard to tell what others are feeling and to communicate our own feelings. And then another phenomena with Zoom meetings is that we have a tendency to look at our own picture more than we look at the picture of others sometimes, and that just makes us really self-conscious, and it's an ineffective way to communicate. So these things can lead to burnout also. Now, burnout is more likely to happen in situations like I've described, but also when emotional labor is required for work. Now, what do we mean by emotional labor? That means specific emotions. Like if you're in customer service and you always have to be smiley and friendly, that can contribute to burnout. And it's also more likely to happen when organizational justice is low. We're more likely to be pushed over the edge towards burnout. Now, let's look at Maslach's 3 characteristics of burnout. Maslach developed the Maslach Burnout Inventory. It's a typical tool used to measure burnout. And she found 3 typical characteristics of burnout. The first is high emotional exhaustion. And this is kind of like the first thing to happen. That's feelings of exhaustion and a lack of motivation due to the work situation. So people start off doing well, but as time goes on, they get burned out and the motivation goes down. And it becomes more and more difficult to display the appropriate emotions. That's why we say it's emotional exhaustion, that we can't get the right emotions to best interact with people and to help them. The next characteristic is high depersonalization. Now this usually happens like when things are really, really bad. We start viewing people as objects rather than people. We have low concern for the recipient's or the client's well-being. They're just another number. We want to get our job done, get out. It doesn't matter if they are doing better or not. We just want to do our duty and get out of there. And sometimes, if we're not interfacing with clients or recipients, some measures of burnout will measure cynicism instead, just how negative you think about everything that you're doing. Now, a third characteristic of burnout, which is not as extreme as the depersonalization, is a sense of low personal accomplishment. Now, notice this is low where the other two were high. Most scales where we measure things, everything goes in the same direction, but this third one, personal accomplishment, we're saying this is reverse coded because low personal accomplishment means high burnout. And that's feeling that one's work is not significant, not being able to see the value of one's work. It's like, what difference does it make that I'm doing this? It's meaninglessness. Everything is meaningless. And so that's another characteristic of burnout. So certainly we want to prevent burnout in ourselves. If we're managers, we want to prevent burnout in others. And if we're providing consulting to managers, we want to be able to give them advice on what they can do to help people not burn out. Now, the perceptions of unfairness, when there's a lack of organizational justice, are often the tipping point. A lot of times people can keep working under high stress, but high stress plus low organizational justice, that is perceptions of being treated unfairly, that often just puts people over the edge. It leads to more burnout, lower performance, fewer organizational citizenship behaviors. Those are things that people do to help other people out or to help the organization out that aren't in their job description, and leads to high turnover intentions and high turnover. So if in high stressful jobs, we especially want to make sure that people feel like they're treated fairly, or it can just push them out of the job burned out. So what are some of the solutions that managers can provide? One is focus on organizational justice. Make sure that everybody is treated fairly, that the rewards are distributed fairly, that information is given to the people about how the resources are distributed, that everybody is respected and valued and treated the way that they should be. So that's the first thing, is to increase organizational justice. And a second solution is to provide more social support. And this can be done not just one-on-one, but it can be done through programmed team support meetings where people don't just talk about work, but they talk about how they're doing. And they can process information and receive support from other people who truly understand them. And then thirdly is learning to use effective coping strategies. Effective emotional focused coping strategies that make people feel better, like with the social support, but especially problem focused coping strategies such as, or solution focused, such as problem solving and planning and receiving instrumental support, things that can actually make their work more effective so they can see the value of what they're doing.